Hi there, and welcome to episode 31 of the Sage Running Podcast. Yes, it's been a while. I'm back. We're going to talk about your top 10 or my top 10 running tips for you, whether you're a beginner runner or an advanced runner. These are small changes that I think you can make that make the biggest difference in your distance running. At least they have in my career, as well as we found coaching other people. My partner, Coach Sandy Nypaver, and I coach athletes through sagerunning.com. We develop training plans there. That is the plug. I'll plug a couple other sponsors as we get into this show. I've got the new Camelback Horizon collection. This is a camping coffee mug. It's got this nice lid. I'm not sure if you could see it there if you're watching the YouTube video, but another business plug is we do sell merchandise, Sage Running t-shirts, any surface, any distance, on our website, sagerunning.com. They're very high quality t-shirt materials. We have a couple different styles. You can check them out. I'll throw up some of the pictures that Sandy and I took on there, but it really helps us out a lot. So thank you. Any service, any distance. You know us. We do road marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks, track running, cross country, as well as the mountain running, ultra marathon running, and anything in between. So these tips definitely will help you, though, if you are into any sort of distance running, basically. And I wrote them down here, so I am organized. But and these tips aren't going to go in any particular order. I'm going to try to keep this podcast under 30 minutes. But you could really extend these tips, and you could really go in depth with each tip that I'm going to list. I mean, it could be its own podcast in itself, basically. But so we're just kind of scratching the surface here, so to speak, surface level of my top 10 running tips. And again, you know, I've been running for over 22 years, year-round. Started running cross-country and track when I was in middle school. But even as a beginner runner, these tips would be very helpful. But even as an advanced runner, after over 2 decades, you still need to go back and remind yourself to do all these little things, or to re-examine and remind yourself of all the training and racing that you've been doing, so that these tips are important, and it takes a constant reminder. So let's dive right in. First tip, number 1 tip. Again, this isn't in order of importance. This is just the first thing I thought of, is increasing your mileage base, your easy aerobic mileage, or how many miles or kilometers you run per week or in a 7-day period. And when you're starting off, we assume the number is much lower. And as you get more advanced and as you get older and stronger, generally that number increases. Now, at a certain point, it could injure you. At a certain point, you're not going to always be running higher mileage as you get older, right? But generally, I found with a lot of athletes we've coached and in my own career, when you start increasing your mileage and consistency, and this is all just easy-paced running, like not speed work or anything super intense, not all racing miles, just going out, conversational pace. If you could increase your mileage from averaging, say, 30 miles a week or about 50 kilometers per week, and eventually get that up to a level where you're doing 50 miles a week or about 80 kilometers a week, a lot of people make really big gains and improvements in their aerobic fitness, or basically their endurance and strength, when they are able to do that. Now, that might take several months. It might take several years for you to get to that level. You may never get to 50 miles a week or 80 kilo a week. It's a lot. It's a bigger time commitment. You usually have to be running at least 5 or 6 days a week. But and some people get injured, and that's going to be another one of my points as we get down on the list. But that kind of increase is pretty substantial. It's pretty manageable for a lot of people, especially when you start getting really serious into running. And, there are different thresholds and other variables, but that mileage increase is really just an indicator of your consistency. So number 1 thing, increasing the easy pace aerobic mileage, and doing it slowly and doing it gradually, increasing that mileage base, really makes a big difference. Number two point is diet and nutrition. I was born and raised vegetarian. Obviously, if you follow Coach Sandy and I, we've been vegan, plant-based, mostly for the last 4 or 5 years. Now, the general saying is you got to eat more veggies, more vegetables. So basically, eating more fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. They're chock full of antioxidants. What are those? Well, vitamins and nutrients. They rehydrate you. The diet, going more plant-based, has helped a lot of people. I'm not saying it's the only way, but the diet is very important for your running, and not just your caloric intake, how many calories you eat in a day, or what your macros are. People obsessed with the percentage of carbs and fat and protein. It's more the timing of the nutrients, eating after workouts and after hard efforts or long efforts, keeping your glycogen stores fueled up, but also having adaptations where you are burning some of your body fat naturally. In aerobic types of running, usually takes over about 30 minutes to kick into that. So diet is real key, staying hydrated, things like that. And yeah, generally avoiding excess calories in terms of eating excess fat. That's a lot of calorie dense types of foods, oils, things like that, or refined sugars, unnatural things with a lot of preservatives and additives. And yeah, there's, refined sugar in a lot of sweets and desserts. Usually those are high fat and high sugar. If you eat a piece of cheesecake, for example, and usually that's a double whammy effect on the body, right? It's not going to be good for spiking your insulin all of a sudden. It's not going to be good for, blood flow and all these things. So, and if you don't burn those calories that you've ingested, you will gain body weight eventually in the form of excess body fat, which a lot of times generally does not help most people's running. But, if you're underweight and you need to gain that weight, that's necessary fat. You do have to have some essential fats and some essential body fats. So you got to be careful that you are also eating enough calories to fuel your endeavors, to fuel your brain, and to not be deficient on anything. And that kind of goes with the idea of also general health and not being nutrient deficient, so not getting low on certain vitamins and minerals, not getting chronically dehydrated, not stressing your body's organs too much in any certain way, and hopefully avoiding illness as well. So the diet, real key. Plant-based has helped us a lot. Generally, people need to eat more fruits and vegetables in general, regardless of what type of diet, and less highly processed food. So that's kind of the rule of thumb on diet. That's number 2. Number three is spending a little time to strengthen the core area. Now, when we're talking core, people think abs, your stomach muscles, but it also goes into your lower back, right? Around your pelvis area, your hips, your groin area, even the tops of the hamstrings, connecting into your butt muscles or your glute muscles. And there's different exercises you could do. You could check out videos on Coach Sandy and I, or Sandy's channel, Running Wild to Believe on YouTube. It has a bunch of different exercises. I've done some. I was kind of lazy with core work as a kid growing up running, even in high school and Division I college. We would do sit-ups and push-ups and things like that. But, getting into planks, getting into some full body lifts maybe at the gym, if you're doing correct movements, could really help strengthen that core area. So the planks were key. Body weight exercises. You don't need fancy gym equipment necessarily. Maybe not doing too many sit-ups with bad form, but doing the right kinds of sit-ups, so to speak, to work more of the lower abs, that lower six-pack region, or the lower two of your abdominal muscles. A lot of people work more of the upper abs closer to their chest, which is good too, but the weaknesses generally happen in the lower back and the hips. You could get a lot of pain if you're unstable there, and not having that hip mobility or that hip strength could really hurt your running stride and efficiency. And we're not talking about crazy gym routines that you have to do hours and hours each week. We're talking about just spending an extra 10 minutes 3 times a week doing some core stuff, right? It's like adding 5 minutes a day to your stretching after a run as well. So stretching and core and doing those little things could make a really big difference, because if they help your running form, they'll help you stay healthy and hopefully not get injured or get lower back pain or some sort of strain. And hopefully they'll keep your stride efficient. And you start breaking down in a long distance race, be it a 5K or a 50K, a lot of times it happens in the core. You see people hunching over, you feel like you can't breathe as well, you get side aches, stomach distress, maybe your lower back and your hips start getting really stiff and tight, things like that. a lot of times it's a structural weakness in that core area because your core, your body's core is dealing with all the counter rotation from your shoulders and your hips and your legs, flailing around as you run, right? Your core is holding you upright with the diaphragm and your breathing and your arm swing. So it's real key in that. Next point, number four tip goes into the running form idea, and it's the idea of shoes. Shoes are very important. If you're running a trail race in the mud and you don't have traction, you're going to be slipping all over the place. You could fall and hurt yourself. You're not going to be up to your potential. Likewise, if you're running a road marathon or a track race in a super heavy shoe that weighs like 2 pounds, it's like bricks on your feet, you're probably not going to run to your potential. And likewise with training, we find that different shoe materials, different shoe shapes, or the last shape of a shoe, different shoe designs, and this is consistent across all brands basically, at least the major brands. I'm sponsored by Hoka One One. It's a different shoe for different people. Some shoes fit better than others. You got to have a proper fitting shoe, but you also have a shoe that fits with your personal gait characteristics or your running form. People pronate differently. They have different arch types. They have different heel shapes. They wiggle their toes differently. They have different big toe lengths. So it's very important that you find a shoe that works for you well, but also have some models that you could kind of rotate into if you could afford it. So, you start putting in 500, 1,000 miles. What is that? 1,600 kilometers of pavement running on a shoe. The cushion's probably going to be pretty worn out. It's going to be pretty flat. And if you're running on pavement a lot, it's going to be pretty jarring to your body. Likewise, even with trail shoes, you start losing traction because your lugs on the bottom get scraped up with rocks. They get wear and tear eventually. Maybe you tear a hole through the upper part of the shoe. If you don't have good shoes to rotate into, or you're running in shoes that aren't suited well for your feet, or they don't fit properly, or they don't work with your running form very well, it could definitely lead to an injury. It could lead to shin splints. It could lead to a lot of discomfort in running. It could lead to bad running form habits, if the shoes may be too built up or something like that. And so it's not going to feel good. So the shoe is a very important tool and technology. And, some people are like, you should just run barefoot. Well, you're not going to run to your potential barefoot if you have to pound the pavement a lot. That's an unnaturally hard surface. You also could cut your feet out there. At this day and age, we have sharp glass and rocks and drug needles and who knows what out on the trails, snakes and things like that. I'd rather not step on a rock and cut my foot open, even if my skin did get thicker from running barefoot. So yes, there are very minimal, lightweight, flexible Hoka shoes, even if you want to get into that. If you want to jog around barefoot on nice AstroTurf and grass, do some strides barefoot, get connected with the ground. It's a great strength exercise for your feet and ankle mobility, but you could do that in lots of different ways. So we don't try to blame the shoes for our injuries, but we realize that they do make a big performance increase, as well as our ability to train comfortably and to be able to run fast and hit certain speeds. So definitely the shoes. Number 5, are we at 5 already? 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5 goes with the shoes, and I kind of already alluded towards it, is the surface you're running on. Most people, I'm down here in town in Boulder. You have to go a couple miles outside of town sometimes to get on some soft surfaces. Now, if you live in a big city, you might have to go much farther, obviously. But the concrete jungle, the pavement and the asphalt and the sidewalks, even if it's a nice paved bike path, it's a very hard surface. Like I said, it's an artificially hard surface kind of that the human body really wasn't designed to run on for long distances, maybe as much, compared to if you're running on grass or you're running on even a synthetic track. It's much, much softer. A treadmill is much softer. Running on AstroTurf, grass, running on dirt trails, real trails like out in the hills, is much, much more forgiving on the body, right? If you go out and you take a golf ball and you drop it on the asphalt, it bounces pretty high back, right? If you go out and drop it in the grass, it just sits there on the ground, right? So that's kind of the force that would be jarring up your leg on impact with every foot strike if you're on pavement. And so if you could have some of your miles, it doesn't have to be all of it. If you're a trail runner and you're always on the trails 100% of the time, that's great. That's awesome. Maybe you do some speed work on a track, but you don't want to be doing 100% of your miles on concrete and asphalt and tarmac roads, usually, especially if you're trying to ramp up your mileage, because it's much harder on your body and you have much more risk for an injury, things like shin splints or stress fracture or getting some sort of injury because of all that impact force. You start doing speed work and long runs, you increase your mileage drastically. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of stress in the body. So if you have a chance to rotate and have some days on soft surfaces, more natural surfaces, then that could be a very big step forward in progress for your training and for your health. It's also very enjoyable sometimes if you could get out on at least some sort of trails. It could even be jogging around soccer fields or whatever you have available, as long as it's just softer. And, you could hurt yourself on the trails as well if you trip on a rock or you slip in the mud, but the impact force is what we're talking about mainly here with that. Point number six, and this also goes into the training environment, and maybe this is harder for you to get access to or not, it depends where you live, is adding in hills to your training or adding in vertical, an element of hill training. Now, for trail mountain ultra runners, this is kind of second nature because a lot of the races we train on go up and down big vertical, right? You're running up and down a mountain or you're doing a run through the forest and there's some hills. It's never flat. And so you actually count how many feet or how many meters per week that you've been training through hill climbs, through long runs, rolling hills. Adding in some element of vertical is really great building strength for your legs, getting used to the hills if you have a hilly race, but then also just spiking your heart rate a bit, right? Running up hills generally gets people breathing and it gets their heart rate up a bit. Really good aerobic adaptations. So, if you live in the flatlands, maybe you have access to a treadmill and you could crank that up. I found treadmills to be a great tool. You've got a soft surface. You've got a very controlled environment with the incline. You could play around with a 5% grade, play around with 8% grade. For most people, you get up to 10 or 12% grade and they might have to start power hiking, but if you could work into steeper grades, that's great. You could also be power hiking on the treadmill. So another great option, and you don't have to worry about pounding of running downhill. That being said, downhill has its own training merits as well, right? You're training for the Boston Marathon. You need to be used to that downhill start on pavement. Your quads will not be happy with you if you haven't done any downhill training and you're doing a race like Boston or a net downhill race, right? So hills, both up and down, but mainly uphill, really can make a difference. And a lot of times in our training plans, we have people doing short hill repeats. So even starting off with 1 minute hill repeats and then eventually working up to like 5 minute hill repeats, more of a different stimulus there, but high intensity hill repeats where you're practicing climbing hard and fast. And it's going to help give you power in your legs, open up that stride, but it's also going to help develop that aerobic system, your heart and lungs, to more higher levels of higher intensity and higher levels of lactate, so to speak, so that when you get into a race, be it a cross-country 5K or an ultra marathon up a mountain, it feels more comfortable when you hit that hill. You're like, okay, I'm climbing. This is going to be hard, but it's going to be something I could handle, or at least I could get up and over the hill efficiently. And yeah, maybe there's some power hiking in there near the top, but it's something your body's trained for. It makes you a well-rounded runner. Even little hills on road marathon courses could feel like mountains when you get past mile 20 or mile 32. So it's good strength training all around. Even flat track runners, Arthur Lydiard, I'm thinking of, did some hill training. They did short, high-intensity hill repeats, training for like a flat 800 on the track or a flat road marathon. So, and they do long runs on rolling terrain also. So there's always some element of hills. Percy Cerruti, another famous coach from decades ago, would have them do like repeats on a sand dune out at the beach. Wouldn't always recommend the sand running, but it makes you tough, it makes you stronger, definitely adding in the vertical. And if you're an advanced trail runner, you are tracking how much vertical you're climbing each week. And there's great apps for that. If you have a fancy GPS watch or you're on Strava or something like that, you could kind of roughly track it or know what your local hill, how much elevation there is going to the top of that and back down. So hills, definitely a big key. Number seven, and this also I alluded to it, is tracking your training and having a training plan. So it's not just going out and running randomly the same loop every day or running how you feel every single day. That is great. I think it's great when people do that. And, if you're not ever training for a race and you're maybe not looking to make big jumps in your fitness in the near future, that's probably a fine thing to do. It's very mentally nice. But if you're getting serious, you want to make some big improvements, maybe you have some race targeted, then having some sort of training plan or structure and keeping track of the training you've been doing over the past few weeks is a real useful tool. And again, I'd mentioned being on Strava. You don't have to be on Strava. It could be a pen and paper log that you just keep a notebook. That's what I used to do. Is I'd just write down the date, how much mileage I ran, how I felt, maybe what the weather was, if any injury was bothering me. Workout details, you could get pretty specific. Like if you go to the track and you're doing some sort of speed work session, you could say, okay, I did 8 times 800 meters and I averaged, 3 minutes, and I took a 2-minute rest in between each repeat. So, you're probably doing that workout. You know what you're doing as you go into it, but then you also wrote it down and you have this record or result of what you did. And then a couple weeks later, you do the same workout and you could refer back to your splits from when the last time you did it. And you could say, well, did I get any faster? Maybe I didn't, but there was a 10-mile-an-hour wind that day, or it was really hot that day. So, keeping those details, it doesn't have to be like a long journal or anything, but having those details could definitely help, and you could start seeing patterns of success in your own training, as well as fondly remember some of those workouts, or maybe not so fondly. But then that goes with having a training plan. Now, business plug again, we do sell training plans at sagerunning.com. They're usually between 12 to 16 weeks. Most of them are 16 weeks, but some people train a lot longer. They'll even train 20 weeks, 24 weeks for a marathon or a long distance race. And they might, race in between, but having some structure and periodization of training, so to speak. And I've done YouTube training talks on this before. Periodization is basically how your training changes over time in different phases. So, Jack Daniels, famous running coach, always in his plans used to have like 4 phases, right? Phase 1 is 6 weeks and it's, building up volume, mostly easy running. Phase 2, we add in reps or some sort of speed work. So it's incrementally adding in certain workouts, and maybe it's only 2 harder workouts a week, right? One on the weekend, you do a long run, and then once a week you go to the track and you do 400-meter repeats or 1,000-meter repeats or something like that, or a 20-minute tempo run on another day, right? You take a couple days easy. So in the week schedule or a 10-day cycle, you see these different changes, but over months and months and months, there might be more drastic changes. All of a sudden, you might be running peak mileage after 2 weeks into a training plan, hitting the highest weekly mileage and the highest long run totals you've ever hit, while you're still doing some sort of tempo runs or speed on the track also. So generally the plans get more intense and volume builds, but having that framework and then also a taper before your race is also very important. So you arrive with your goal race on the starting line, you arrive fresh and healthy in your best shape possible. And that's what the goal of a lot of training plans are, is to get you from A to B, realizing that, there's some variation in there, but it's better than just randomly going about your day or going about your month's training and hoping for the best, right? Because I think as runners, we kind of have short memories in terms of what we did 2 or 3 weeks ago. You could be like, oh yeah, I did this long run, and then you don't realize all the details of all the other runs you did that week, or you didn't realize that you've been training maybe too hard over the last 3 weeks. And so it gives you a good reference point, as well as your weekly mileage totals could be very motivating, and you could control that variable very well. So it's about metrics in your training. Number eight is having running with other people. And this might be harder in this year, 2020, with the COVID era, because group runs have generally been discouraged, or at least we have to spread out a bit more and be a little more careful. We're not doing giant pack runs really close together, breathing in each other's faces, but having teammates, if you're in school or you're in a club team or you have some social running group, could be very, very encouraging. It's a double-edged sword though, because it could also make you overtrain, but generally it's really good motivation. And I found this to be a lot more true as I've gotten older and done more solo training. It's a very nice distraction to have a training partner or a teammate or a friend to do at least some runs with. It doesn't have to be 100% of your workouts and long runs, but it's generally really nice to have company. And if a person's slightly faster than you, they could really pull you along to some great workouts, and it hurts less. You're less distracted. Maybe you're more motivated to wake up early in the morning and meet them at the track, or to do a long trail run with them, because you could talk and there's conversation and it's fun. It's social. You forget about all the work of running, so to speak, and the pain of fatigue maybe, but it's very motivating, and your teammates could pull you along. And when you see friends or people or peers that set personal bests and set records or FKTs or marathon PRs or 5K PRs, you say, hey, why can't that be me? Right? I trained with this person. I have done some workouts with them, and it brings you up to that next level. Just taking a sip of coffee there. So the teammates, the training partner, again, it's a double-edged sword though, because they could they could run you into the ground, especially if they're a lot faster than you. But if they're slightly faster than you or slightly slower than you, you kind of do a lot of training around the same paces, even hard workouts, and realize that, hey, on tempo run day, maybe someone's having a really good day. They go for it. You let them, you're by yourself anyway. But on other days, casual runs, you could get in the miles together. They go by a lot faster. Point number nine is rest and recovery in terms of your sleep. Sleep as in how many hours of good sleep, high quality sleep you get per night. Now, I realize this is probably hard for a lot of people if you have little kids, if you have a demanding job, or you have to wake up early and commute, or start working pretty early in the morning, and then you're up late also working or taking care of the family. It could be really hard, but you try to control the variables that you can. The sleep environment, what type of bedding you have, your mattress, the temperature in your house or apartment, could all make a huge difference. How much caffeine you drink in a day, how much alcohol you're drinking close to bedtime, how big your dinner was, what type of food you're eating for dinner, going back to point number 2 with diet there, could affect your sleep. So generally, don't eat a bunch of high-fat food and high-sugar food right before bed. Don't drink a bunch of caffeinated coffee right before bed. Don't drink a bunch of alcohol right before bed. Could really hurt your sleep quality. Even if you pass out, you might not get that high-quality REM sleep necessarily if your body's dealing with all these other things. Likewise, if it's super hot in your apartment and the air conditioner broke like it did in ours, it's hard to fall asleep. And same thing with waking up early in the morning. Yeah, it's great to wake up early and try to get those extra miles in, but some days you're probably going to need that extra half hour of sleep. Might be better for you, right? If you're trying to overcome an injury, or you're pushing too much and you're getting life stress from work stress and other stresses in your life, could hurt your hormone levels and make you more susceptible to injury or illness. So the sleep has always been a huge thing for recovery, and I guess it's kind of a no-brainer, but I think thinking in terms of quality hours of sleep and maximizing that is really the important metric, because we're all pressed for time, some a lot more than others probably. So sleep, really key. Now my final point number 10, it's kind of goes back to the same first point of building easy aerobic miles, easy base miles, is keep your easy days easy. Don't let the ego get in there. Don't get the STRAVA. Don't worry about what people think. You could jog very slowly to get your miles in for the week on your easy days, and realize that, it's okay if you try to keep your heart rate low. Try to keep it a conversational pace, but still focus on having good running form. Now, usually, your stride rate, or how many steps you take in a minute, your cadence is going to drop on those days a little bit. But you want to keep pitter-pattering along nice and quick, nice and light on your feet. So good form still, but go as slow as you want. You don't have to push every single day, right? And save those days for your workout, higher quality workout days, like the tempo run days or the long run days or the track interval days or the hill repeat days. Those are your efforts that you're gauging and going hard on. The easy days should be relaxing, and it's about getting the miles in. I don't believe about in junk miles. Some people go like, oh, you went too easy, like you're basically walking. Well, walking's actually good training too. But, getting some sort of element of a jog in is for sure important, but I'll be going easily 2 minutes per mile slower than my marathon race pace. So that's like, what is that? A minute and a half per kilometer slower than my marathon race pace. And it could be even slower than that, especially on the trails or if there's some sort of hills or adverse weather. So, don't worry, don't stress about the pace on truly easy days. That being said, if you're always jogging LSD, long, slow distance all the time, you won't get faster because you're going to need some sort of speed and some harder workouts to push yourself in. But when you're first increasing that mileage, you got to keep the miles easy to reduce the risk for injury. And again, realize these points, it's not a bulletproof formula. There's no magic pill, or so to speak. Like, I've seen people get injured on 30 miles a week or 50K a week. I've seen them get stress fractures. Some of it's out of your control. It could be genetic. People are dispositioned to have lower bone density. Again, though, that relates to diet too sometimes. But, you're turning your genes on and off as you go about your training, as you go about sleep and diet, and doing these extra strength exercises, rotating your shoes, going through all my points here. And realize all these small things do make a big difference in the end. And, some I would say are bigger than others, but it's harder to prioritize exactly which ones those would be. These are just my top 10 tips in these top 10 different categories. So thank you so much for subscribing on here. Really, really appreciate it. The Patreon supporters for this audio setup here. Hopefully you like the audio experience. I realize I could do more with probably the background if you're watching this on YouTube with the videos, and when we get Coach Sandy back. Also, maybe even having guests in the future on the podcast. Again, I want to keep that going, as well as subscribing on here on YouTube. Really helps me out a lot. We're going to do a big prize giveaway at 200,000 subscribers. VO2 Max Productions on YouTube. You can follow me on social medias at Sage Canada. I'm even on the TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Sage Canada fan page on Facebook. And again, thanks so much to title sponsor Hoka One One, keeping the dream alive. Camelback for this coffee mug. And check out our training plans, sagerunning.com. Any service, any distance. Check out the t-shirts. Thank you again, guys. Hope you're doing well. Stay tuned for more.